Hi! So today I'm going to be doing my June mid-month wrap-up. I have read 13 books so far in the first half of June. I think this wrap-up is going to be a little bit quicker than I normally do, just because there's a few more books than I normally have in my mid-months. But I'm just going to go ahead and get straight into talking about the books that I've read so far. So the first book I read is Pretty Girls from Karen Slaughter. This is a thriller. I gave this one 4 stars, and I'm not going to talk about it because I did a reading vlog on it, so I will link that down below if you want my thoughts on that book. The next book that I read is Hooking Up from Helena Hunting. This is the second book in the Shacking Up series, and I really loved this book. I gave it 5 stars just like I gave Shacking Up 5 stars. So this one is about one of the characters from the first book, but she gets married, and at her wedding reception, her husband does some nefarious things with another woman, and it gets blasted over the sound system at the reception where everyone can hear. And so she's mortified, absolutely mortified, runs away, and ends up just jumping the bones of the first man she sees, pretty much. And then is mortified because she did that. Nothing happened between them, but she's so embarrassed that she did that. And so she ends up deciding to go on her honeymoon by herself. And the guy that she jumped on, pretty much, ends up being in the village that she's at on her honeymoon. And so the romance is between the two of them. And I thought it was so good. It was funny. The husband made me mad on multiple accounts. Like, he comes back into the picture later on, obviously. And the things that he says just infuriated me. They made me so mad. But I thought this was such a good book. I would definitely recommend reading the first book, Shacking Up, first, just because you'll know more context and you'll have a better idea of some of the side characters. But overall, absolutely loved it, would 100% recommend. Next, I read Twisted Loyalties by Cora Riley. This is a adult romance. It's a mafia romance. And this one is about Fabiano, who is abandoned by his father, who is like this big mafia guy. He's like an important person. I can't remember his like title, but he gets abandoned by his father. And so he has to fight to find his place in the mafia. And he ends up becoming a street fighter. And then from there becomes the enforcer for the Camorra. Twisted Loyalties is the first book in the Camorra Chronicles. And then we follow Leona, who just wants to form a life away from her drug-addicted mother, and ends up catching the eye and the attention of Fabiano. And once you catch his attention, you can't really get away until he wants you to. So it's a romance between them. I thought it was really good. It's one of the first mafia romances that I've read in many years. Like, it's been so long since I've read one, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. The reason I didn't give it 5 stars is I just felt like it was missing something. I don't really know what it was missing, to be honest, but I did feel like it was just lacking somewhere. So I couldn't give it the full 5, but I will definitely be continuing on in the series. Next, I read Neighborly by Katrina Jackson. This is an adult romance novella. I gave this 4 stars. Thinking back on it, I might have been a little bit too generous with my star rating, but I don't know. I always rate my books based on my enjoyment of them at the time, so I don't really like to go back and change it unless I feel stronger about it than I did at the time. And I don't feel that way, but I feel like maybe I was too generous with the 4 stars. But this is about Heaven, who is an artist, Calvin, who is her boyfriend, who is a boxer, and they end up getting a new apartment, and their landlords are their neighbor. And their neighbors, pretty much the gist of it is they invite them to their bed, pretty much. So that's really all this book is like their attraction, specifically Heaven's attraction to the wife of the other couple, the relationship that they form, and boxing. So I felt like this book had really, really good communication between all of them. I do feel like it was well done that way, especially between Heaven and Calvin, being able to express their wants and needs in their relationship and not feeling like they couldn't, or that they were put in a box, or, you know, being afraid of judgment. There was none of that. So I really, really appreciated that. However, I feel like there was way too much about the boxing, like about Calvin's boxing. Calvin's boxing career, it does play a part in the book, and that's totally fine. But I just felt like there was too much of the boxing, and I didn't care about the boxing at all, which is why I lowered the rating a little bit. But I do think it's a good book. Like I said, it's very short, it's a novella. I felt like there could have been a lot more to it. So it was one that was just kind of like a fun read, but it's not gonna stick with me. I know that. Like it was fun, but I don't know that I wouldn't deter someone from reading it, but I wouldn't like go out of my way to recommend it either. Next, I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a fantasy. I gave this 4 stars. I feel like this was so well written. It was a beautiful story. It wasn't what I was expecting though. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting, and I think that's my own fault. I see a lot of people give this book 5 stars, and I think it deserves 5 stars, but I couldn't give it 5 stars because I had the wrong impression of what it was supposed to be, and that's my own fault, and I hate that. I hate when that happens and you're disappointed because of unrealistic expectations or because you were just given false information about what the book is about. So I gave it 4 stars. I think if I would have gone in blind, I would have given it 5 stars. I like to go in blind about pretty much all of my books because I hate when this happens. But this book is about Constanta, who is saved from the brink of death by a stranger who ends up being Dracula. Someone else who has read this, please let me know. Do they ever actually mention that his name is Dracula in the book? In the synopsis they do, because it's a Dracula's Bride's retelling. It's what the first thing they put in the synopsis. And they talk about Dracula in the synopsis. Either I missed it or I'm just forgetting, but I don't think they ever actually said his name was Dracula in the book. I don't know. But she's saved by Dracula, and then she's transformed from this peasant to this bride to an undying king. He turns her. And you follow their journey of her realizing he's capable of horrible, terrible things that she didn't think that he was capable of. You follow him bringing on more consorts and her having to try and accept that, and then forming a relationship with them, and her trying to decide if her freedom, their freedom, or her love for him, Dracula, is more important. It was such a good book. I'm so upset, like I said, that I had the wrong impression of what it was going to be, and therefore I only gave it 4 stars, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I think I could have. So I think this is one that a few years from now I might reread. Next, I read The Initiation by Nikki Sloan. This one is an adult romance, and I gave it 4 stars. This is about this woman, the heroine, who makes a deal to save her family and has to go through the initiation with her soon-to-be husband so that he can be selected and join this board. I wanted to give this book 5 stars really badly, and I thought there was a possibility until we get to the initiation. And the initiation, what happens during the initiation, which I won't tell you, made me feel kind of gross because it was bordering on non-consensual, and I was someone who could look past that in books, and it didn't bother me too bad because it's just a book. But the older I get, the more it makes me feel gross, and I don't like it. There's 2 things that I really have a hard time getting on board with is non-consent and infidelity. I just don't like those 2 things in books. I will be continuing on with this book, with this series 100%, because it ends on kind of a cliffhanger. Not a full-on cliffhanger, but it ends with something where you're like, excuse me? So I will 100% be continuing on with the series. I still really, really enjoyed it. There were just one character in particular that made me feel gross, and I didn't like that, so I dropped it down to 4 stars, but still super good. I would recommend reading it, but it's definitely like it's a dark romance, I would say. It definitely has parts in it that you're like, that's not okay, but overall still very enjoyable. Next, I read The Furies by Katie Lowe. This I gave 3 stars. This is a thriller, a YA thriller. I did a reading vlog on this one, the same one that I did on Pretty Girls, so I will link that down below if you want my thoughts on this one, but again, this was just 3 stars. Next, I started The Death of Viktor by Akweke Emezi. I DNF'd this at 25%. I just wasn't in the mood for it. I didn't want to listen to it. I was listening to it on audio, and I'm sure you all know when you get to this point when you're listening to something or reading something and you just stop caring, you can't really make yourself care again. Like, it's really hard to make yourself care about what's going on once you don't care anymore. And I've pushed through so many books when I have felt that way and just went ahead and finished them and ended up giving them a low rating, or didn't like my time reading it, just wanting it to like hurry up and be over with. And I just don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I just want to read books that make me happy, that bring me joy, that I'm liking reading in the process of reading it, and that's it. I don't want to continue reading these books that are really popular or that everybody else loves, and I'm just not. So I DNF'd it at 25%. Next, I read Love in the Wild by Emma Castle. This is an adult romance. I gave this one 5 stars. This is a Tarzan retelling. It has been many years since I watched Tarzan. I don't think I've watched it since I was a child, so I don't know how close to the original Tarzan or the Tarzan like Disney movie this story is. From what I've heard from other people, I think it's pretty close, but I loved this book. I enjoyed it so much. This is a hero who is obsessed with the heroine. He protects her, his whole life revolves around her once he meets her, and then there are some things, because it's Tarzan, so she has to leave to go back to the real world and he stays in the jungle. So there's some factors that try to keep them apart, but I loved this so much. Absolutely freaking adored this book. 100% read it, even if you weren't like a huge Tarzan fan. Like, it was just so good. You have to read it. Next, I read Hideaway by Penelope Douglas. This is the 2nd book in the Devil's Night series. This is a adult dark romance. I gave this one 4 stars. So I didn't like this one as much as Corrupt, which is the 1st book in the series, because I didn't like the heroine as much in this book. I can't really tell you what it's about, who the main characters are really, or anything, because it would spoil some things, and you should really read the 1st one before you read this one. So there's not a whole lot I can say about it. Still absolutely loved it. Will be 100% continuing on with the series. It just was a little bit less of a favorite than Corrupt was, but that's okay. Next, I read American Queen by Sierra Simone. This is an adult romance. I gave this one 5 stars. When I tell you I was not prepared for what was going to happen in this book, I was not prepared. Like, 100% go into this book blind. Like, all I'm going to tell you is that it's the president romance, and I feel like that's all I should tell you. I don't feel like I should tell you much more. There is some very mild BDSM in it, very mild, like not any like whips, chains, things like that, more just like dominance type thing. And it's just so good. I loved it so much. This is the New Camelot trilogy, so it's 3 books that do follow the same characters. So I'm super excited to start on to the next one, but I don't want to spoil anything. Like, you just have to go into this book blind, but trust me, if you like any of the same kind of books that I like, please read it. It is so good. Next, I read Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is a YA fantasy. I gave this 2 stars. I know that's an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people like Ruin and Rising about as well as they like Shadow and Bone. I liked Shadow and Bone. Did not like Siege and Storm that much. Ruin and Rising is the worst of the 3, in my opinion. Alina just gets worse and worse and worse every time I read her character. I can't stand Alina. When the twist came in Ruin and Rising, I literally rolled my eyes. I was like, are you kidding me? This is a joke. Like, you're kidding me. Of course, this would be the little twist you want to throw in. Give me a freaking break. It made me so mad. And then at the end, if you've read Ruin and Rising, which so many people have, at the end, why they couldn't just leave that person dead, I don't understand. Like, why they couldn't just leave it like that, I don't understand. Because I just hated it. It just pissed me off. So much about this book pissed me off. I love Nikolai though, so I'm going to continue and read Six of Crows. It's probably going to be a little while before I start Six of Crows because I disliked my time in the Shadow and Bone trilogy so much that I need like a break from that before I try to read Six of Crows, because if I don't, I know I'm going to go into it with bad attitude and it's going to hinder my enjoyment of the read, and I don't want to do that. But I want to continue on because I want to get to King of Scars because I love Nikolai so much, just like everybody does. I feel like Nikolai is everybody's favorite character in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, just like he is mine. So we're just gonna pretend like I didn't read the Shadow and Bone trilogy because I disliked my time reading it that much. Normally I would have 100% DNF Siege and Storm and never continued. But because I want to get to Nikolai's story and I've heard Six of Crows is so good, I pushed through. If I don't like Six of Crows, I'm done. I'm not going to keep going just so I can read Nikolai's story, because if that's the case, I'm probably going to dislike it. Even though I like Nikolai, I will probably still dislike the duology. So we're going to give Six of Crows a shot eventually, and we will go from there. And the last book I read for the first 2 weeks of June is Desperate Measures by Katie Robert. This is an adult romance. I gave this 4 stars. This is an Aladdin retelling where Jasmine gets with Jafar instead, and Ali is the bad guy. So I really, really liked this. This was really good, except I felt like it needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. I feel like their relationship needed to have a little more conversation behind it, and they needed to talk about a few more things. But overall, it was really good. I'm going to continue on. It's not like the next book isn't following Jafar and Jasmine anymore, but I am going to continue on with the series. This one does have, again, the same thing of that very soft BDSM type dominance situation. It does have consensual non-consent, which is different than what I was talking about earlier. I don't have a problem with that. And it does have like a daddy kink in it, which took me a little bit of time to adjust to because it sometimes makes me uncomfortable, but I was fine. I adjusted to it and I didn't like take away from my enjoyment of the book at all. So definitely one, if you think it's interesting, check it out. I liked it. It's not my favorite because, like I said, I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, but it was a shorter book, so it is what it is. It was still a very good book. It still had some action and things like that in it, so definitely check it out if it's on your radar. So those are all the books that I have read so far in June. Let me know if you have read any, if you plan to read any, what your thoughts are on them, anything like that in the comments below. You know, I would love to know. And that is everything for me this time, so I will see you all next time. Bye.